My name is Elizabeth Evans, and I'm a homeschooling mom to four kids, ages 2 through 9, and we are learning how to make joy normal.
My name's Bonnie Landry, and I want to welcome you to season 2 of our podcast, Make Joy Normal. We want to thank everybody for their support and how much you've shared this podcast with your friends and those who you think it would be helpful for. I am a wife, I'm a mom, I'm a grandma. I've been homeschooling for 30 years. My kids are ages 14 to 33. I only have one at home now. I'm a speaker, a writer, a blogger, and I guess we're podcasters now, Elizabeth. And I'm an advocate of joy. So welcome to our podcast. How are you, Elizabeth?
Hello. Doing well. How are you?
Good.
All right. So today we have a lot of questions around just kind of common problems in homeschool life.
Okay.
So let's get started.
Okay.
All right. So the first question that there is I find it hard to find social time, especially now during the pandemic. And most group activities such as Bible studies or just groups in my area are usually full of moms that don't have their kids with them. So I think this is a common problem.
Yeah, especially right now, I mean, I think it was a problem really universally. I think it's a problem in the sense that we don't always know how to break into an established community, or if there isn't many homeschoolers in your area, you have this issue that you are, kind of floundering a little bit, right, in terms of social life. So I'm assuming because she's talking about her kids that we're talking about sort of, family socialization, right?
Right. And even probably mom time, but with kids having something to do too,
Yeah. It's hard right now because we're in the middle of all these shutdowns. So let's speak to that for just a moment. I think most of us are in this really challenging place right now where we don't really get to see other people. My own sort of very basic group of people is quite big, so I'm not feeling that, but I also don't have little kids. And I think it's really the people with small children. We so desperately need to be around other moms because it helps us to feel like what's normal behavior. We see their kids misbehaving, or we see their kids asking, the kind of questions they ask or the way they're behaving. And that really, like living in community, that really helps us to normalize our experience, right? And so that's been kind of stripped from us right now, right? And we have to sort of look at this, I think, a little bit as a time of not having to develop some coping mechanisms right now. Okay.
Right.
I was just talking to one of my daughters this morning, actually. We talk on the phone quite regularly. And I was saying, when I had young kids, like the phone was my lifeline, because I just needed to know at least once a day I would phone somebody and just kind of have a maybe 15 or 20 minute conversation, maybe an hour if it was a friend or something. But it was a lifeline for me when I, couldn't get out just because I had a lot of little kids, right?
Yeah.
And so I would suggest to people that find some way, even if it's that you're sitting in your kitchen or your living room with your kids and having a cup of tea, a friend that's willing to maybe Zoom with you, right? Or phone you, and that your kids are running around and that's okay. And the noise in the background is okay. You're not trying to accomplish anything. You're just trying to create kind of a reference point of normality. Right.
Yeah.
And so it can't be in person. For many of us, it can't be in person right now. And restrictions in some areas are getting even tougher. So, if we can somehow normalize social life, that whether it's by phone or whether it's by, text even or whatever, but, ideally that we're actually looking at a person's face, and if you're living in a place where you can have small gatherings, try and do that once a week, even if it's really putting yourself out there to maybe another young family in your church that you don't know very well. Hey, could we get together? Most of the people you meet right now will be starved for socialization, right?
Right.
So those are just some thoughts on sort of this crisis time. I don't know, in your experience, what kinds of things you're doing. Do you have the opportunity to visit anybody right now?
Well, so I think that the trouble is that you have some families that are very willing to socialize. And then you have
Yeah.
others that are extra cautious. So we have friends that we have maybe only seen once, maybe twice since March.
Right.
And they just live a couple blocks away. And then we have other friends that we've seen, about once a week, every 2 weeks or so.
Yeah.
It really just kind of depends on how cautious they are,
Yeah.
and what they're willing to do.
Exactly. And, and another thought too is like, and I mean, in every situation, depending where you are, you can't really speak to rules because the rules vary from state to state and province to province, Um, but, as homeschoolers, I think we have to bear in mind that your state or province may not have really clear guidelines about homeschoolers and what they're allowed to do.
Mm-hmm.
Some do and some don't, but we could assume at least that we're probably, if there are no guidelines, that we're probably allowed to get together in small groups as homeschoolers because, for school activities, right? And so as long as you're following the constructs that are set up for the schools, which might be over the top, but it would be better than nothing, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
In almost everywhere schools are operating. So, we would have to assume that as homeschoolers, we are allowed to be operable in socializing in some way.
Right.
Right.
The other thing I thought about is that, one easy thing to do, especially with families that are more cautious, is see about meeting somewhere outside. Now, in a lot of cities and states, that's hard to do right now. It's a little colder this time of year, but, spring is kind of around the corner. Maybe not for us in Michigan, but for other
for us
people,
it is for sure. But
right.
Yeah. But we're an exception in Canada, right? We're by the mid-February into February, it's definitely, we're moving towards spring. So, but meeting outside, so even if it's short get-togethers, it will help to normalize right now, right? And so just other thoughts on that, in terms of non-COVID kind of socializing, which is less difficult, but still difficult in some situations, that, if you know that there's sort of an active homeschooling group, and you're trying to kind of break into it, sometimes the way to do that is to actually host something yourself, right? Mm-hmm. Whatever it is, your talent, I'd like to do drawing lessons for a group of kids. I'd like to do, do a little nature hike for kids ages, maybe preschoolers to, 10 years old. Is anyone interested? Take whatever it is that you love or you think is important for you to do and just put it out there, right?
Yeah.
And, you will find that if you create something, people are likely to want to join you. There will be somebody who wants to join you. If you live in an area where there isn't really a strong homeschool community, there is almost guaranteed there's going to be, a couple of other homeschooling families nearby, and they're probably struggling with the same thing you're struggling with, right?
Yeah.
So again, we can sort of put it out there. We can put it on Facebook. We can put it on, a poster at our church or whatever. And just say, hey, I'm thinking about doing a park day for homeschoolers. I don't think there's very many of us, but, it might be a nice way to get together. Again, instead of relying on something to be created, just create something, and sometimes for many of us, that's way outside our comfort zone, and so if you don't feel comfortable just having people over at your house, then, just go somewhere where there's a natural activity, go to a beach, go to a park, go to a playground, right?
Yeah.
So
I know we have a local conservancy, and so once a week we would go, and there'd be like 2 or 3 other families, mostly with a lot younger kids than my own, but there'd be these little nature hikes and stuff, and they have chickens, so we'd feed the chickens and just kind of stuff like that. So that's something else you can check and see if you have a local conservancy or, park or something to see if they're offering anything.
Yeah. And almost every community does, right? They have something, so tap into what's available to you for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think that's a good segue into finding time for for us moms or dads,
Yeah. Such a universal problem, right?
it is. It is.
And I mean, it gets easier as your kids get older, but many of us have lots of kids.
Yeah.
And, so we're still dealing with toddlers and babies when we have teenagers. And, so getting some time for ourselves is really important. I think the hardest time, again, is when you just have little kids, right? Because, I mean, it's sometimes we need to employ somebody, one of our older kids, like, okay, can you guys take turns? I just need an hour's break, or I need a 15-minute walk for myself, or I need whatever. You've heard me say this before, but I always recommend people to plan it, right? Plan your time off. Otherwise, you're always trying to scrape for time away and trying to claw at it. And that's just not good for us to feel. I think what happens is it builds resentment. If we feel like, okay, maybe I can just dive away. And then when we get interrupted, we're so frustrated, right? Where if we actually plan time away, whether that's with our spouse, with our older kids, with a neighbor kid, with another homeschooling kid, or another mom, maybe we plan, you take the kids for an afternoon and then I'll take your kids for an afternoon, or we get together and just let the kids play so that we have a time to visit with each other. Right. But most of us need some time alone too. And so, find a way to make that happen and plan it, because if you don't plan it, we always drop to the bottom of the list. Right.
Yeah.
And, I think that that's really important to make that a priority, first of all, but also to just make sure that it's on the schedule for the week or the day. Some people need, 15 minutes a day, an hour a day. Some people need a few hours on a weekend, whatever. Be willing to be flexible. It might not be the ideal time you want away. For example, sometimes people have husbands who work 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. So they're gone for 2 weeks, right? Well, how do you get a break? What does that look like? Maybe it means when your husband comes home, you have a little more time to yourself. You're going to get through these couple of weeks and then you're going to have some time to yourself. Or maybe it means you hire somebody, or you employ a relative or something like that to help you get that time away. Or, in some situations when you're really stuck, maybe you have a show that the kids regularly watch and you put it on for them so that but don't just, do something for yourself. Don't just use that time to rush around and get your housework done. Right.
Right.
That has to, obviously that has to be done too. It has to be part of it. But, we come back refreshed when we get time away, whether that's locking ourselves in our bathroom and having a hot bath, or whether that's actually getting out of the house for a few hours. We rejuvenate ourselves by doing that, and we appreciate our families more.
Yeah. So I just recently, I got a bullet journal. I'm trying that, seeing how I do with that. But I kind of almost scheduled the entire day, like from the time my kids are waking up, eating breakfast till they go to bed. And it kind of got overwhelming because I had like every half hour filled, and I kind of kept thinking, okay, dictation probably won't take that long, or, math lesson or something like geography. We don't do geography every day. It's usually 2 or 3 days a week. So, I put a little asterisk at the top of the page and I said, be flexible, just a note to myself to know that this doesn't have to be followed to a T.
Yeah.
And so then I started implementing it, and I found that we did get our things done a lot sooner than I thought. And so we had time to, get everything done. Because what I was worried about was I had everything done till like 8:30. And then I thought, oh my gosh, I have to kind of prep for the next day. And then that's like a half hour before I probably will pass out on the couch of exhaustion. That's not much time to spend with my husband or to relax,
Yeah. Or you would laugh if you saw my calendar, because basically my calendar back in the day would say, read to the kids, do sit down work, read to the kids again, and then I would have something, houseworks like do laundry room and 15 minutes in the basement. And that's what that would be, or I would just say something as vague as, 1 hour housework, right? like I have this very basic framework for my life, but and we kind of do the same things every day, but it was just never, scheduling was not something that was attractive to me because I felt like it would be a stressor, and for some people it's not a stressor, but for me it was like the idea of having to complete something with little kids, having to complete something at a certain time. Like, no, this is what we do in the morning. And if it doesn't get done, oh, well, I'm going on to whatever the afternoon is supposed to do. Yeah. So I work with a bare bones framework for sure. Yeah.
I did it more as, I did it more as like accountability for myself, so it's like, that's why I wrote be flexible, so that I didn't follow it so, closely, but that I also had, a framework to work with. So
yeah, when I think that's the beauty of the bullet journal, right? Is that you can put things in but it's your things. So you're not looking at and thinking, oh, I'm supposed to get X done because somebody else has written that you need to get X done in your, homeschool mom planner or whatever it is. Not that that works great for some people, but, for many of us, that becomes just one more thing on our to-do list that is impossible, right?
All right, let's move on to a topic that I think weighs heavy on my heart a lot. How do you have any tips for a mom who struggles to be present for a long period of time with kids?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's hard to be present for a long period of time with kids. And I think that we should probably just work at being present for short periods of time. And be okay with that. For example, sometimes you have a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old who could literally play the same game with you, on repeat, right? Like repeat. And that nobody could continue being that present for all of that game, right? And I don't even know that that's what the child wants necessarily. They just want you to check in once in a while, right? So for most of us, being present just in little moments is probably more important. And, for the child too, I think just being present in little moments, kind of knowing that you're there. I think that the timing of presence is probably what matters, so that when the child comes to you with a question, that you mentally put down whatever you're doing and kind of focus on them, look them in the eye, and be really attentive to what it is they're telling you, right? And so I think to maintain that for long periods of time is probably not realistic. And I don't even know that it's what we're meant to do. But to be present in little short moments, that's what most kids want, right? It's when they're sort of badgering us for our presence, often is a sign that we're not being present, right? So if we stop everything, if we say we're distracted by the many things we're distracted by, our housework and our phone and our whatever it is we're distracted by, and the child is kind of at us, and we kind of feel like, oh, they died. Why can't they just leave me alone? And then thinking I'm not being present. It probably wouldn't take very long if we put everything down mentally, literally put everything down and just put it aside and said, what were you telling me? I'm sorry, I wasn't listening very closely. Tell me what you're telling me, or show me what you're showing me. And just allowed ourselves to be absorbed into their world. That would probably only last for a few minutes, because in a sense they want to get on with their play or whatever it is they're doing without them sort of sucking tons of our time or energy into that, right? And that's healthy. It's healthy for kids to play on their own, right? This is just anecdotal on my part, but when I've noticed kids who sort of have an insatiable, kind of a bottomless pit of neediness, is often kids who don't feel very connected, right? For whatever reason that is. But oftentimes it's because their needs are not being met. Right. So we as moms, and all of our kids probably go through periods like that, but kids who are sort of like that kind of chronically, often there's kind of a disconnect, right? for most of us, we've chosen this life. We've chosen to be stay-at-home moms. We've chosen to homeschool our kids. So it's not something that's a chronic issue, but more of kind of a situational problem. And, so if we can kind of give ourselves over to that, that is really helpful. That's one of the reasons why I think dictation is such an effective tool, is because it's this cozy, warm, fill up your tank moment with our kids. And that if it goes sideways into just talking about their life, that's okay too. Right. And I think that it's a filling the tank moment. So I think that it's a great way to start the day. By the way, I'm going to be doing a masterclass on dictation. I just posted that on Facebook this morning. And I'll be talking definitely about that in that class, of that dictation is an opportunity to fill your child's tank, right? It's an opportunity to be present to that child. And so, I think that often it fills their tank for the next couple of hours, and they're sort of happy to do their, whatever work they can do independently after that. So when we're being present, though, I think we need to be very mindful of fully being present and not allowing, that which is taking up space in our brain, just put it on a back burner and be very present. And, to the point where we can say to our child, you know what, I was totally tuned out there and I'm so sorry. What is it you were telling me? Can you tell me again? Because, this matters to me. And expect that might take 5 or 10 minutes, but it's not going to be for the next 2 hours, right? If it takes the next 2 hours until that child is exhausted of your time, it might be a sign of something else being an issue, maybe being not being present enough in a more chronic way, or something else going on with the child, right? So I think that that's something that we need to just be aware of, that we don't need to be present for hours at a time, but minutes at a time, right?
Yeah. I know I've set a goal to, spend specific time with each of my 4 kids every day to kind of fill up that tank. Like one of my sons loves board games. That's his thing. He's always asking, what do you want to play with me?
I love it.
And so, I'll play a board game with him. I'll read out loud to we read aloud as a family, but my oldest especially loves that time. And so I make sure to do that. And then just playing with the other little two. But it often doesn't feel enough, and I actually, this is kind of a good almost segue into the next question. I was standing in the kitchen the other day with my husband and I said, I don't know how to talk to my kids. I don't know how to get conversation going. And, the oldest is still just 9. So maybe I'm, expecting too much of myself or them. But, I kind of try and ask them questions about books they're reading or movies we've watched recently. And not just like questions you would ask when you're studying something, I'll ask fun questions like, would you rather live in Middle Earth or Hogwarts? Stuff like that. Right. But it never feels like it goes very far. And so, I want to have a good foundation with my kids so that they want to talk to me when they're older and really need me. And I don't know that I'm taking the correct steps to get there. Can you share your perspective?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. First of all, I think oftentimes a question can actually be like, if you are trying to stimulate conversation, and, kids go through phases too. Like you'll probably go through a phase where you feel like you can't get a word in edgewise, and then, maybe in the teens and the broody kind of years, that a conversation is harder to tap into. And, kind of, we have to respect those stages too. But I think sometimes saying something rather than asking something is kind of a good way to go about it. Say, for example, you're watching a movie and you say, wow, that character, I thought he was a nice guy and he turned out to be not a nice guy.
Yeah.
Right. And, and so that rather just sort of putting it out there into the universe and see if anyone grabs, right. That's, that can be one way of stimulating conversation, as opposed to you know what I mean, being more pointed, just sort of being more, a little more, you
Yeah.
know, putting it out there. But a couple of other thoughts on that. One of the things that many people will say is often kids will talk more if you're not face to face with them, if you're actually beside them. So in the car, or if you're going out for a walk or something, and just sort of, you know, asking questions about life, like say, you know, hey, did you have fun at that birthday party you went to yesterday? We never really talked about it. You know, or how is so-and-so doing, you know, one of your friends or whatever. You know, framing questions so that it's indirect rather than direct, which I guess is the same thing a bit as sort of making the statement like, whoa, hey, I just had this really cool idea. What if Middle Earth had been a desert instead of, you know, kind of forested area, and, you know, kind of what we know as Middle Earth? Like, what if it'd been completely different, like tropical or something? Would that have changed things? I wonder, you know, like sort of you're wondering yourself, and then you see if they, you know, catch your coattails on that. But also sort of this idea of walking beside or standing beside or driving beside, you know, is often a good time to just chat, because it's less, I don't know, maybe less threatening or something. I'm not sure. But it's just a little more comfortable than, you know, kind of direct questions. The other thing too is often when my kids were younger, I would take bedtime as an opportunity to kind of chit chat with them, you know, and opening with very open-ended questions like, did you have a good day? You know, or you know, maybe it starts with, oh, I'm sorry, I was grumpy today. I didn't mean to be, you know, and just as a kind of a way to open up conversation, or what was your favorite part of the day? Or what was your least favorite part of the day? You know, excuse me, very open-ended questions that you know, they can answer or not answer, right? But, you know, you kind of, in a sense, leave all these little connection points just dangling, and let them grab the ones they want to grab, right? And you know, and they will eventually grab things, but I wouldn't make it something that you worry about, right? That, you know, at different points, and boys too tend to be less conversational, I found anyways. Like, you know, one of my sons was very conversational, and the other two, you know, just more keep to themselves, and, you know, that sort of thing. So partly personality, partly sort of a gender, you know, inclination. So, but we, you know, we dangle things a lot, right? Just dangle the big questions in the air, and then, or the small questions, doesn't really matter if they're important or not, but just dangle them out there, and you know, let them grab them when they want to.
Well, I guess that did kind of happen earlier today. My son was asking me how much it costs to buy a hamster or a guinea pig. And he goes, that's what I want.
Oh, the dreaded question.
And then my other son said, no, I want a rabbit or a bird or something. And I said, well, I want a dog, which all my kids know I want a dog really bad. And I even have a name picked out for this dog. So my oldest son said, well, I want a German Shepherd, and I have two name options. One of them is Chewie, after Chewbacca from Star Wars. So anyway, my son goes, well, Chewie would probably try and eat my hamster. And then my 6-year-old goes, well, Shere Khan would be okay. And I was like, who's Shere Khan? And he goes, the bird. Hilarious.
I don't think your kids have any problem with conversation.
Maybe it's amazing. Just when I reach out for it, you know, like I'm looking for specific times and it doesn't happen, but I guess it does happen when I don't expect it. But I just thought that was really funny.
That is funny. Yeah, they're listening regardless, right? Regardless of whether you think they are or not.
Right.
That's amazing. Yeah. So how are we doing for more questions? Do we have time for one more?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do one more.
Okay.
Can we talk about how we as parents can let go of what we wish our kids would learn versus what they actually want to learn? When I read this question, I immediately thought about your story about the Are You My Mother? And how you prepped all this stuff about, was it nests or eggs or something?
Yes. Well, I had prepped all the stuff about eggs and reproduction. Okay. That was what I was going to talk about.
Yeah.
And this is my oldest daughter. So she's, you know, maybe 4. We just started homeschooling. And yeah. And so I had gotten books from the library, and I'd kind of thought it through about how I was going to approach this. I was super excited about it because I was going to make it as my first unit study. And I was capitalizing on, a book she already loved. And then, she said, I brought this out. Oh, I have some interesting stuff about eggs and how chicks come out of eggs. Would you like to see it? And she said, well, no, not really. And it was like, I was so deflated,
Yeah.
And she just said, I'd really like to know how nests are built. And she kind of went on that rant for a little while. And I was like, okay, you know what? I am totally didn't want to do this with an agenda. That was not my goal. And yet now I can see where I have built this little agenda in my brain.
Yeah.
And that is bugging me, that she doesn't want to do what I want to do. So yeah, so learn from my mistakes. But it didn't take me very long to turn around, but it took me thinking, okay, are we going to learn more? So here's maybe the thing to think about. Are we going to learn more by learning about what they want to learn about? Or are we going to be learn more about learning about what I'm imposing upon them?
Right.
And so, what we know is we learn way more when we're interested in the topic, right?
Yeah.
We can circle back to those other topics. That's it. You got a lot of years of homeschooling ahead of you, and you're going to repeat things many times.
Right.
Here's the deal. If you never covered how a chick gets out of an egg, it's not like life is lost.
Right.
And your education is lost because you don't know how a chick got out of an egg, right? You can look it up, when you're 25, no big deal. But we sort of can get hung up on things. And so I think that's the thing we have to remind ourselves is, you know what? They're going to learn more because they're interested. And we can circle back to my agenda some other time, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of got tired of studying ancient world because we did that a little bit last year and we didn't finish. So I thought, we'll just start again this year. And I just kind of burned out myself talking about it.
And they can too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we switched to medieval times and I'm really excited. And so I'm reading this to the kids the other day, and it's Philip Campbell's Story of Civilization.
Okay, cool.
And he did say is geared more towards older levels, but I was like, we're just going to jump into it. We'll see how this goes.
Yeah.
And I was reading it and I was kind of thinking, I wonder if they'll pick up on any of this. And I was like, I wonder if I'll even remember any of this because it's a lot to take in, just even in the first chapter. And so I was kind of telling my husband what we were doing. And I realized because I was all interested and excited about it. And I was able to tell him like all the stuff we learned and, the major key terms and everything. And I was like, but I'm interested in it. So I can't be hard on them if they don't get it real quick.
Yeah, exactly. And you're going to circle back every 3 or 4 years, right? You're going to do it again. So, and they're going to pick up new stuff every time and kind of broaden that world, right?
Right.
And, so just kind of respecting, what they take in. Another tool that we have at our disposal, of course, if we say for whatever reason, maybe the government says, okay, this year you have to learn about, Canadian geography. Okay. Mm-hmm. And my kids aren't interested at all. And maybe I'm not interested at all, but if I'm following some government program, I'm not, but if I was, that this was the year we have to do some Canadian geography, that we can employ sort of salting the oats, right?
Yeah.
So without any sort of agenda, like we're going to read this dry book about Canadian geography, we could just say, hey, we can't go on a driving trip right now, but if we did, let's map it out. Okay, let's find something they're interested. Maybe they're interested in bears or lakes or hockey teams or whatever, and say, let's map out the route we would take and what we would see there, and make sure what you're seeing there includes some of the things that they really that they're really interested in, right? So maybe they're really interested in sports or, animals or whatever it is they're interested in. You can just bring that into, your own curriculum, and you can say, okay, so every day or every week, let's go through one province. And what would we see there? Okay, here's where we are, and we're traveling through this province. Oh, this is so cool. Look at the animals we're going to see. Look at this we're going to see. Look at the landscape, and so you're studying Canadian geography, and they don't even know you are, right? Yeah. So, you can kind of salt the oats that way, where you define a little bit of your day to go through, this thing that maybe nobody wants to do, and make it fun and exciting and put it in a framework that they would find fun.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that sounds fun. I might add that to our lessons this year.
I just made it up.
I love it. Yeah. I hope I can do stuff off the cusp like that.
You will. You totally will. Those first few years of homeschooling, you're kind of filling your tool bag, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you learn from other moms, and you learn from podcasts, you learn from books, and you just stuff your tool bag full. And every once in a while you think, oh, I could totally do this right now. Right.
Yeah.
What was the original question? Just to make sure I'm,
just kind of how to let go of kids, learning what they want to learn versus what we want them to learn.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So how to sort of, offset our own agenda. And sometimes our agenda is our own agenda, and sometimes it's something that's imposed on us too. And that's important to acknowledge that if for whatever reason, if I think, no, my kids are at an age where they have to learn about weather, right? We totally have not learned about weather at all. And I just think that's a really important component that we must learn about. And though this year, even if they're not interested in weather, you can find a way of making that interesting, right? Sort of capitalizing on their interest, but you don't have to do it, from a textbook, or you don't have to do it from a curriculum or a program. You can just think, okay, what would interest them? If we went out for a walk 15 minutes a day and then journaled what we saw, right? That's going to spin off into, okay, well, what was it? Well, there was a bit of blue sky and there was a bit of clouds. It was kind of windy. What does that mean? What does that mean? What time of year is it? What are the patterns? Oh, and then, you could see, oh, there's a pattern. The weather's getting colder as we head into winter. The weather's getting warmer as we head into spring. You could find ways of doing that dependent on their, their own interests, right? But we just have to think outside the box sometimes.
Yeah.
I have a lot of ideas. I've been homeschooling, for a long time, and I have a lot of ideas. So if anyone just has no ideas, just email me, because I can guarantee you I'll have an idea for whatever. And some of the things I did with my kids, and some of the things I just passed through my mind, like, hey, that would be cool if I ever needed to, employ that. I could do it now, right?
Yeah. Okay. Can we go off topic just for a minute?
Yeah.
Because I was very happy to find this out today. I learned that Canada and Denmark have been in a war since 1984. And it is very amusing. And it's like the most peaceful war I have ever heard of. Are you familiar with this?
No, you texted me that today, and I thought, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I believe you. But
well, it's so funny. Apparently there's an island called Hans Island, and both Canada and Denmark have claimed it. And the way they've claimed it is something like so Canada provoked Denmark by planting their flag on the island and leaving a bottle of Canadian whiskey. And then the Danish minister of Greenland came to the island, and he had the Danish flag and a bottle of schnapps and a letter stating "Welcome to the Danish island." And I guess this has been going back and forth since 1984.
Okay, this is really funny. And it's kind of the polite way you would expect Canadians to have a war.
Right. Exactly.
I don't know much about Danish people, but maybe they're equally as polite as us, right. Apparently.
Well, and here I am, an American, and our country is just going insane right now. And I'm like, I'm about to trade sides to go to Canada.
I know. I wonder if there's lots of Americans thinking that right now.
Right. It's just
too funny.
It's so peaceful and almost kind of posh too, like just leaving a bottle of alcohol on an island saying it's mine. If
Yes.
only,
It's
only
the way we do
pirates.
things. Yeah.
Pirates should have just done this way back when they had enough alcohol, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to go look up Hans Island now.
Yeah. I love it.
Well, I guess we should wrap up, eh? Should we wrap up now?
Yeah.
Okay. So God bless.
Yep.
Thank you for providing me with that info and feeding my imagination. You please keep submitting your questions, and I might field Facebook sometimes for questions as well. You can get a hold of me via Instagram or Facebook or my email on my website. And God bless you all, and have a great week.
Bye.
Okay, bye.